Today, Apple announces the iPhone 13 on the 14th. Sounds a bit ominous, don't you think?
Then, is AI, artificial intelligence, really dangerous?
And data after 9/11. What is the legacy?
I am Stephen Rosenbaum, and this is Future Forward.
I'm Alexa Scordato. Let's launch.
Hey, Alexa.
Hello, Steve.
I just want to point out for those of us, for the listeners who aren't seeing a video picture, I'm always in the same place every week. And Alexa literally is somewhere else in the world. It's like the Waldo joke. It's like,
Where in the world is Alexa?
Where in the world is Alexa? But you are back in the States. Welcome home.
I'm back in the States. I've just moved north of New York City. I'm like city adjacent. I'm evolving into a suburban resident.
I would say you're evolving, but I wouldn't say suburban would be the label I would use for you. So, by the way, I have a funny story to tell you. Well, it's not haha funny, but so I was on a call with my Media Lab team, I guess a week and a half ago, when it was the day after the big floods in New York. And I said, is everyone okay? And everyone was okay. And I said, what happened in your neighborhood? And one of my younger team members said, oh, well, the minute I woke up, I just immediately went to see what was going on TikTok. And I'm like, okay, note to self, maybe Twitter I would have understood, or maybe Snap, sort of, but I did not know that TikTok was now a breaking news source. So
that actually is surprising to me because I have yet to sort of experience it in that way.
I thought it really, I made a little note on a sticky pad, put it on my computer. It's like, need to understand that behavior, because it didn't seem, the tone that she took when she told the story was that it wasn't unusual for her to think of TikTok as a news source. So
that's interesting. We should revisit that. I don't know whether if it was like a live feed or people posting, but
I don't know. And then I spent some time on Reddit related to 9/11 stuff, and have to confess that the speed bumps to get something published on Reddit were surprisingly complicated for me. Like there were each different community had a whole set of rules about, you need the date in parentheses, you need the length in brackets, and it has to be done in this order. And if you don't, we don't publish it. And we mark it as attempted to be published, so we don't let you do it again.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. I experienced a speed bump just joining a subreddit, just like waiting for the mods to like approve me.
Yeah, I actually applied to one and didn't get in, or at least haven't in a timely manner. I guess that's a good thing, because it probably cuts down on spam. Anyway,
yeah.
All right, so we have 3 chapters in today's show. Chapter 1 is the coming Mac event and all the things going on with Apple. There's a lot of Apple's news. Chapter 2 is about AI. And then chapter 3, we're not going to talk about 9/11 specifically, but the last 20 years, it's worth remembering how much data collection has changed in the last 20 years. So, for example, the iPhone, Mac Rumors is generally pretty good at this stuff. And Mac Rumors essentially says big yawn, which is
it's pretty predictable, right? It's iPhone in 4 the lineup of like 4, similar to the last release, maybe an update to the Apple Watch, like bigger, and maybe some AirPod stuff, and then some operate OS adjustments. Is that really the summary?
I mean, I want to believe that Apple is smart enough to know that if this is really what they come out with, those 3 things, that both consumers and Wall Street will punish them mightily. But I have a 12 Pro, which I like very much, and I'm on the Apple upgrade program, so it doesn't cost me anything except the taxes to go and hand them an old phone and get a new phone. And my current phone isn't damaged; it isn't cracked or broken, so it would be seamless for me to get the 13. And like if you read the granular stuff on Mac rumors, it's like, well, let's see, the camera's going to be bigger because it's going to be better-ish, and I don't know. It was
Our camera phones are so good. It's like I know they can always get better and they will, but it's just hard to imagine like a regular person's use case because we take photos and we're often still just looking at them on the camera, right? It's not like we're blowing them up into some massive resolution and doing really intense photography.
yeah. I'm nervous about the Apple announcement on the 14th.
Mm. I will say though that I think I'm finally going to bite the bullet and get an Apple Watch. And maybe this is like I'm on the Pam train because you just got her an Apple Watch, right?
Yep. Yep.
I just feel like I have so many people I know who are not even diehard Mac users. Like they don't have a MacBook or an iPhone and they love their Apple Watch.
So I will only say this. As I was traveling to a in-person event, traveling meaning getting on the subway. That's my version of traveling. And being aware of the fact that I had in my bag my iPhone, my laptop computer, my iPad. I don't know what the limit is to the number of Apple devices you can have on your person at any one time, but 4 seems extreme. That being said, everyone I know that has an Apple Watch loves their Apple Watch.
Okay, but to your point though, the reason why some people love their Apple Watch is because it minimizes the device dependency, meaning if you want to go out for a run or a walk or even just, I don't know, get into like a workflow, you can kind of put your phone away or leave it at home and then just be hands-free with your watch.
I don't think you can leave it at home because the Apple Watch, at least most of the incarnations that people have,
it needs your phone to like,
connect.
Yeah. Okay, but you don't have to have it like out on the table or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's a step in the right direction. All right, so let's move on to the other big Apple news, which in some ways is more interesting, depending on. So Apple lost the Epic court battle.
You know what's so interesting? They lost. I meant to pull up this tweet and send it to you. The CEO of Apple, though, Epic Games, says that he lost, and there's some nuance in that because he still feels that the judge did not rule Apple as a monopoly, and that the power of Apple is still grossly unchecked.
Yeah, I read both. One version of the story in TechCrunch says Apple lost, woohoo. And then the other says essentially, Apple lost a few, and then this is a Bloomberg Tech article, said a few $1 billion. And they say it, if you read into the body of the article, kind of lightly, like, to your point, because the judge didn't say that Apple was a monopoly.
Right. But this is like I don't know, maybe it's like a path forward. So basically it allows developers to link outside of the Apple ecosystem and get consumers a purchase path that goes around Apple Pay.
It's funny. As a technologist, I want there to be less of a stranglehold on innovation from Apple. And then as a consumer, I don't know about you, but I just spend an inordinate amount of time managing subscriptions and checking my credit card. Yet yesterday on my credit card, out of the blue, there was a charge from Barnes & Noble. It's like, I haven't been to Barnes & Noble in a year. Turns out that buried deep in the Barnes & Noble terms of service, they automatically renew your premium membership. And
not surprising. I feel like any subscription these days comes with an auto renew, which for me is just so shady.
Yeah. And so, we Barnes and Noble, and they refunded the money and they shut off the auto renew and they took the credit. But it was like, it's 15 minutes of your life you can't get back.
Right.
So here's the reason why I think I'm going to play Wall Street analyst for a moment, which is not a job I either have or want to have. But if the Apple announcement on the 14th lands flat, if there's not a one more thing surprise, and then on top of that, the court registers as a loss, I think you could start to see Apple with a little bit of a chink in its armor.
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, having said that, I think it's got to be somewhat relentless to have to do, how do you make the iPhone 13 measurably better than the iPhone 12?
I don't know, but you know what? Apple's been in this iPhone game for a long time, and I have never once even said I would switch to an Android.
My mother-in-law has an Android, and we try to support her use of it. And it makes us want to claw our eyeballs out. And by the way, I'm not sure that it's that better or worse. It's just, I'm sorry, we're familiar with, the settings, and we understand how the Apple works, and we understand how to support it. And
do you still use Windows at all? Ever? No, right? No.
Every now and then, if I'm forced to by a partner or a client, I will unhappily be dragged into Microsoft Word.
Okay.
And that's as far as I'll go.
Yeah.
All right. So since we're beating on Apple a little bit, let's go further. Let's talk about Siri.
So this is actually devastating for me because I bought a car in the pandemic, and Apple CarPlay is so useful to me because most default car GPS systems or dashboards is just like very rudimentary software. So Apple CarPlay lets you pair your iPhone with your car dashboard, and there are certain voice commands like Siri, play Spotify, right? Or Siri, open Waze. And this new update is going to actually cut off those integrations.
I've got to say, and listeners of this podcast know that I'm often, I don't pull my punches. I think this is the stupidest thing I've ever read.
I just can't understand why they would do it. Like, it's possible that they need to like re-architect something that will then make the next release better, but it just looks like they're cutting their SDK off at the knees and really preventing the Siri ecosystem from growing.
So I've been using voice a lot more in the last 6 or 8 months. Just tired of typing, and it's so shockingly bad. Like, if you try and go on Apple and put into Notepad 3 or 4 paragraphs, I mean, it'll get 3 words in or 6 words in before it just does something jaw-droppingly wrong. And then you're correcting it, which is worse than typing it. And, my theory, which is based on no secret inside knowledge, is that they're shifting from trying to take your voice and turn it into the words you say to a very different AI-driven voice to text that is trying to be connecting what it knows about you, like people in your contacts. It's trying to be more connected to your data cloud rather than just doing voice to text transcription. And in the process, it's making horrifically stupid mistakes.
Yeah. I have no motivation to use Siri outside of being in a car where you have to be mostly hands-free.
So I was the other day on my bike, listening to Spotify and thinking about what a spectacular experience it is to be biking in New York with Spotify and a playlist you like. And it got to a song I didn't particularly like, and I said, "Hey Siri, skip to the next song," and it answered something like, "Next song is the title of a piece of music recorded," and I'm like, and it went off on this long narrative, kind of bizarre journey into garbage that was like, first, like, great, you went on the internet and typed next song into Google, I guess, or Siri or whatever search engine they're using, but it
But
was.
I mean, as bad as that is, now you won't even have the option to do it.
Yeah. So what will it say though? Will it say, "I'm sorry, we can't connect to Spotify"?
No, it just won't work. You're just gonna say Siri next song, and it won't do anything.
Well, that's kind of what happened to me.
Yeah.
So let's play the game. You and I have both been in software development a long time. Imagine the conference room where somebody said, "Hey, in iOS 15, we ought to start, killing our third-party integrations." What would be the pluses? What would be the pluses and minuses of that decision?
There's either a revenue component where access to an API and actions either are going to become a premium feature, or there's like a cost savings benefit where calls to the API are just like taxing the overall system. And so you have to like shut it down. And then you just do an analysis on like overall adoption, how much is this going to hurt the bottom line, how much is going to hurt the customers, how much is it going to hurt the developer ecosystem.
Is there some kind of a negotiation going on that says to Spotify, this is, we have Apple has all kinds of developer licensing protocols that are invisible to the outside world. Is there a new API, blah, 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 that costs blah, blah, blah per access that they're trying to get developers to have to pay? I'm going to say yes.
I mean, because a lot of like Twitter, for example, Twitter used to have a very robust ecosystem of apps, and developers used to develop apps for Twitter all the time. And then Twitter just locked it down, and that whole fire hose of integrations became oriented around B2B. And so you have like social media monitoring tools that then pay Twitter for access to their fire hose. I don't see Apple doing that here. And so I don't know, I'm scratching my head because I don't know what the underlying causes or motive for doing this. Like, is it a data thing? Like, or are they surrendering to Amazon and saying, okay, Echo and Amazon are going to be the dominant like voice Internet of Things default?
All right, so I'm going to send my message to the universe and therefore to Apple for those Apple executives that are listening to this podcast. First of all, throw something really groovy in on the 14th if you've got it in your hip pocket, because I'm counting on something groovy. 2, whatever you're doing with Siri, you got to stop. And 3, let's learn a lesson from the fact that you didn't, that the court ruling could have been worse. And this is about openness. Apple, openness. Just like take a deep breath, chant for a moment, think about openness.
Good summary, Steve.
All right. So moving on, let's talk about AI for a minute. So I rewatched Ex Machina the other day.
Good movie.
And I'm midway through The Imitation Game.
Also a good movie. Is this your first watch of Imitation Game?
No. Both, okay. And I never watch anything twice, but both are second watch.
Both great.
And so reading this article that came up in Datamation, 2 things. AI is either the best path to a better tomorrow or the harbinger of an apocalypse. I have a theory, but I thought I'd let you go first.
It's really hard. Like what I appreciated about this article is just talking, like considering like the moral imperatives or the hierarchy of values and how that needs to kind of inform AI. I just don't know if we're there yet right now as a society. Like I'm usually glass half full and an eternal optimist. I still want to be, but I think that the first era of AI is going to be a net negative.
So I don't know why this has come up, but I find myself when I'm on the phone with any corporate interaction, whether it's an insurance company or pharmacy or anything that's got a branch and tree set of decisions, if I get to the operator or like Spectrum trying to get my cable fixed, I can hear the branch and tree answers they're giving me that could just as easily be automated. It seems like there's a decision to give the people that are on the front lines of talking to consumers no discretion, no flexibility, no choices. Let me see if I can help with that. And it would be extraordinarily easy. And it's not even really AI at this point. It's really just more algorithmic, filtering to
just automation.
Just make it a computer, and I think what I worry about with AI as I think about it is if you put AI between you and Amazon, you have to look at what its corporate owner's objective is, right? Its objective is to sell you stuff, not to save you money, not to give you the best price, not to give you the best reviewed product, to give you the product with the most margin for them. And which is to say, not to be creepy, but like in this case, and certainly many, AI is not your friend. It's not your AI searching the internet for the best priced version of toilet paper. It's Amazon sending you to buy a thing. And I think that's probably true of insurance companies that don't necessarily want to get you the best deal, or Spectrum that wants to keep you away from canceling. To your point, I guess. And then there is the big philosophical question, which I'm spending some time now with theorists and philosophers on AI. In some ways, the worst possible outcome of the evolution of AI is, what if AI doesn't care about humans? What if as it becomes more sentient, it's not that it wants to kill us, it just doesn't matter to AI?
I think that's why there are groups that are forming that are trying to actually account for that more in the programming of AI systems. But I mean, this article was, I think the biggest takeaway when you read this article is that it's saying, how come we have yet to emphasize AI use cases around things like climate change, preventing forest fires, or misinformation? And it's, again, we can talk about it through the lens of technology, but it's almost like if you take it a step back or zoom out, it's like, why are we as people not caring more about these things?
Yes. Let's go on to our third chapter because we're going to run out of time. Very interesting article on TechCrunch from an author named John Ackerley. And the headline is 20 years later, unchecked data collection is part of 9/11's legacy. And we'll put it in the show notes. I'm not going to read it to you, but it's worth remembering that 20 years ago today or yesterday, there was no iPhone. So this flood of data that back then, things like, the Patriot Act were starting to get free access to, didn't exist yet. The volume of data that the government has given itself permission to have access to has grown exponentially. And probably not in a way that's helpful if you're trying to track down terrorists, for example.
Right. So the article basically says that in the days after 9/11, the Patriot Act was swiftly passed, which basically set a new precedent around user privacy and access to it. Everything from being able to wiretap phones to accessing data sources, and it's gone largely unchecked. There's like one line in the article that says something along the lines of, we can all agree that privacy is a right, but the government is doing very little to protect it.
So I'd like to think, I wrote down this morning as I woke up and then posted on Facebook and a bunch of other places, 9/12, what's next? Because we've got 20 years of history. Technology has grown exponentially. Our military footprint around the world has grown exponentially. We're theoretically out of a forever war, but it doesn't really feel like we are. We're out of Afghanistan, but the posture of the government hasn't changed. I think data plays a critical central role in that, and I think this article really made me realize, we gave the government information long before we were exporting a digital footprint at the scale we are now.
Right. And that access has real life and death consequences. Like one of the examples it cites in the article is, we left military equipment in Afghanistan that has biometric data that the Taliban can now use to basically source all of the informants and Afghan citizens who helped the United States.
Yeah, the whole leaving equipment behind thing, I don't claim to understand. I guess getting it out, conversation for another day. So here we are 20 years later. Data is prolific. It's also dangerous. It's also complicated. It's also, it's the keys to both of our lives. I'm 3 degrees away from knowing everything about you. Everything from your shoe size to your favorite colors to what kind of dogs you're thinking of adopting to where you travel to what kind of tickets you buy. And the thing is, none of those things individually seems like an infringement, but when you put it together, the profile is incredibly valuable. And I think really the issue that I care deeply about is consumer control of their own data.
Right.
If you walked into Target to buy a pair of shoes, they wouldn't say to you at the door, before you come in, we need to know your blood type.
Right. I don't know. What with me is like my parents, grandparents, they're so much more susceptible to bad things happening. Like I've lived most of my adult life very public, right? Like I've checked in on Foursquare, I blog, I'm on social media. And yet the number of times my mom, for example, has had like identity theft or fraudulent credit card usage is like 10x mine.
Interesting. That's troubling. All right. Well, have a good week. Enjoy the 9/12, the week of 9/12, and see you again next week.
See you next week.